The sexual self likes freedom, the freedom to be, the freedom to experience, the freedom to enjoy. It likes the freedom to be oneself, to be naked in a sense, to be raw, to have to not prove anything. The sexual self does not like judgment. It doesn't like pressure. It doesn't like goals. It doesn't like having to prove anything. We are self-conscious creatures and we fear not being worthy, especially when we take our clothes off and show up that exposed. We're afraid of not being loved, not being desired, not being enough. And so those meanings of self-judgment or judgment of our partner or pressure to prove something about ourselves or our spouse through our sexual response, we start giving our sexual self demands that make it unhappy and make desire go away. Welcome to When Sex Isn't Easy. Several questions were submitted that I'm just going to go through, but I wanted to talk about the topic, generally speaking, for a minute before I dive into the questions that were submitted. So I would say this is the number one challenge that I work with in my practice and in the courses I teach is the challenge of not feeling desire in marriage when it feels so important to be able to feel it, right? Because it disappoints your spouse, it disappoints you, or you're the higher desire person and sex isn't easy because it's a pain point in the marriage that you don't feel desired, you don't feel wanted, pursued, cared about. And the challenge is that we bring so much meaning to our sexuality, especially when we marry someone and how they feel about us matters so much to our sense of self that if they don't desire us or if they think we're not doing enough sexually or we're not invested enough, all of that really matters to us. And the meanings that start to emerge within a couple very quickly start to undermine the meaning context in which desire thrives. So if you think about when you first fell in love or first met someone that you were deeply attracted to, that sense of attraction and desire was just like happening to you. You weren't trying to get yourself to feel something. You were just feeling things. And in fact, sometimes feeling more than you even wanted to feel. And the meanings were all operating in the direction of desire, the novelty of it, the attraction, the hope, the possibility, the validation that they really like you. And so, what often happens in marriage is that we start loading meanings onto our sexuality that work entirely against eroticism or eros energy. So, the wonderful thing about being human is that we have a prefrontal cortex. In the prefrontal cortex of our minds, we're able to forge meanings. We, in fact, aren't just able to, we can't help but create meanings about our lives and, in particular, about our sexuality. And those meanings either enhance sexual desire or they interfere with sexual desire. So, as I talk about in my courses a lot, other creatures like dogs, for example, can copulate, right? They can reproduce, but they cannot make love because they can't bring meaning to their sexual experience. Their just biology takes over and they hump, okay? But this is not being driven by their attraction, their desire for the other dog, okay? And so they almost never have sexual dysfunction, right? Because the dog cannot think, is he really into me or is he just here for the sex? Or has he noticed that I've put some weight on my thighs? Dogs are not thinking those things. And so they don't have sexual dysfunction, but they also don't have transcendent, passionate, meaningful sexual experiences like humans can have. We as humans are often bringing in meanings that are killing desire at the inception and we don't realize it. Okay. And so the humans are just naturally sexual, right? Sexual response is natural. It's experienced in utero. It takes no skill to have arousal or to have pleasure. Okay. But even though it's natural, right? Many of us struggle to feel desire and feel pleasure in marriage because our own minds are getting in the way. Now, I don't mean you're just making up trouble here and that, that you're the problem, quote unquote. Okay. But I want to help you understand what meanings may be operating without you realizing it that are interfering with your own ability to find the source of eros or the source of desire that you need. So, what does the sexual self, in fact, like? When does the sexual self show up? The sexual self likes freedom. It likes the freedom to be, the freedom to experience, the freedom to enjoy. It likes the freedom to be oneself, right? To be naked in a sense, to be raw, to have to not prove anything. Okay. The sexual self does not like judgment. It doesn't like pressure. It doesn't like goals. It doesn't like having to prove anything. Okay. And if you think about it, because we are self conscious creatures and because we fear not being worthy, especially when we take our clothes off and show up that exposed, right? We're afraid of not being loved, not being desired, not being enough. And so those meanings of self judgment or judgment of our partner or pressure to prove something about ourselves or our spouse through our sexual response, we start giving our sexual self demands that make it unhappy and make desire go away. Okay. Make our natural responsiveness be muted or undermined by all the things that, all the meanings and the judgments and the pressures that we're putting on our sexuality. So the biggest problem is we are asking our sexuality to prove something, and our sexuality has zero interest in that. When you were falling in love and you just were feeling sexual desire and attraction, you weren't trying to prove anything. You weren't trying to get that person to love you through having a sexual response, right? You were just experiencing it. And a lot of times it's because you're like, I can be myself and he or she really likes me. Okay. That's a very erotic meaning. We like to have sex with people that make us feel good about ourselves. Okay. We like sex when it makes us feel good about who we are. We don't like sex when it makes us feel insufficient, when it makes us feel that we have to work, that we have to solve something. When I did my dissertation research, it just happened to be that a large percentage of the women that I interviewed had had fertility issues. And the fertility issues killed desire because they were asking their sexuality to solve something, to prove that we're fertile, prove that God's not punishing me. A lot of people had that fear or that meaning that that was why they weren't able to have a baby. Prove that we get to be parents and have all the things that we hope for in life. And when you put that pressure on sex, desire, eroticism goes away because that's not where it lives. That's not how it exists. And then what often happens is we, for example, think, what's the matter with me? I don't feel desire. What's wrong with me? And we start putting all that judgment on us, makes our desire go down even more, our arousal go down. And then we really start to judge ourselves. Okay, now I really must be broken. And we are pushing all the wrong levers that are intuitive, but actually work against our capacity for eroticism. Now, of course, this is challenging because when you're in a marriage and you've really chosen one another and you don't have alternative, you don't have options, right? If you've chosen to be in a monogamous, committed relationship. And so the sense of obligation can move in very quickly, right? You're my only legitimate option. I have needs, okay, whatever it is. Or even if your spouse doesn't say things like that, but you grew up in the idea, for example, that a good woman is going to take care of her man's sexual needs. Okay. That is precisely the meaning that will make desire plummet. Okay. Will erase it because you have now given sexuality a job to do. And then a lot of harsh judgment on yourself for not being able to do that job well. And many women think of like, I want to be the kind of person that's the right kind of wife that like doesn't disappoint her husband. And they're all that guilting and pressuring and accommodating and so on is killing any access to the erotic. Okay. So I would just start with the idea that it's a bad idea to judge ourselves for our bodies not doing what we want, because usually our sexual self isn't happy. It's trying to show us something that we don't feel free, that we don't feel good about ourselves, that we don't feel free to be ourselves, that we don't feel able to just be in our own skin and be close to our partner. It's trying to indicate like, I don't know how to thrive here. Okay. So I'm going away. It doesn't mean something's wrong. It just means there's something to understand about the ecology of your relationship and why it doesn't seem to be conducive to high passion or conducive to desire. So the less we judge it and the more we try to understand it and what are the meanings that are in fact operating, right, the more able we are to do something that actually invites erotic energy. So in the women's course, I'm really helping women to understand how they have related to their sense of self and how they have related to the question of sexuality. Because often women have been trained unwittingly into a meaning around sex that interferes with passion and desire being available to them in their lives. They've learned to be selfless. They've learned to not be in their own bodies, to deny their desires, to be accommodating of others, to not actually know themselves, have a deeper reference point to their own souls. And that is the source of erotic energy, is a deep connection to ourselves. Stephen Schneider, who's a sex therapist, says something like, when you go looking for erotic inspiration, make sure to look within yourself first, right? Not going to find, erotic images or so. I mean, there's those things can have a value, a good erotic story or something. But if we neglect finding this deeper source within ourselves, none of that really works. It might work for a night or something, but then you're always in this kind of hunger. You've not found what really is at the core of an erotic marriage. Erotic, what I mean is full of life. It has a life energy to it. It's real. It's magnetic. It's alive. The desire comes from a place that's authentic within you, not forged, pressured, right? And so when we haven't found a way to belong to ourselves in our own lives and in our own marriages and belong to our bodies and our own desires, we have a really hard time then being able to access the source of eroticism when we're lying next to our spouse. And instead, we've filled our minds with lots of pressure and judgment and anxiety. And it doesn't end up working, right? It's like trying to pressure ourselves to go to sleep. Like, what's your problem? Why can't you sleep? Desire is something that we open ourselves to, that we receive, but we can't make it happen. And the more we try, the more elusive it is for us. So I'm going to just go through some of the questions that were submitted. This person says, any thoughts on how to change my mindset? I want to enjoy sex. I don't want to recoil when my husband mentions it or touches me, but I just do. I don't know how to change that mindset. He's a good man and he wants me to enjoy it. I just did it out of obligation for so long that I don't know how to break those aversions and take those walls down. Any suggestions? So what this questioner is pointing to is that she understands that for so long she was in this obligation mindset that sex was something you are supposed to do, that you have to do, that she really, in a sense, it sounds like trained up her body to feel a sense of entrapment, that I'm not free, that this is an obligation, something I have to do, and her sexual self has rebelled. And she's saying, I'm so accustomed to that meaning that even though I know he wants me to enjoy it, right? And I know that maybe I've done it wrong in the past, it sounds like she's saying, I just don't know how to shift out of that old meaning towards a better one. And so, first of all, what I would say is that the more you can understand, like, what is actually happening in the immediate sense, that is, what is the story I'm telling myself about sex, right? What is it, that I have to be here, that my husband wouldn't love me if I weren't here? I'm just making up different possibilities, that I can't actually be myself, that I need to satisfy him, that I need to have a response and be passionate for him. Like, where are the places in which you're putting demand on yourself that make the whole experience not feel like a place of ease and freedom, but a place of demand and work? Some of these are so natural for us, so intuitive, as in we are so accustomed to thinking this way that we hardly recognize them as libido killers. We hardly understand that we're in a meaning frame in which no sexual energy could possibly survive. And so we have to, in some sense, like, make explicit what has just been so implicit to better see the meaning that we're in. And a good therapist can be helpful if you need that kind of assistance in making sense of it. So it sounds like you have this sense of constriction. So one of the things that I would recommend is that, first of all, I think you have a decision to make on some level about that you want to develop this. It sounds like you do, okay, but I think the more conscious and clear you get about it, the better. So in other words, if you're in the frame that I have to do this, I have to work on my sexual relationship, if I don't, my husband is just going to be so miserable, or whatever it is, that's just a meaning frame that's already out of the gate not going to work. Because if you see it as that you don't really have a choice, okay, your sexual self is going to sniff that out, is going to know it, and will rebel against it. So you don't want a rebellion on your hands, okay? Now, if you are truly in the mindset of, I want to have a better sexual relationship with my husband, and I want to do things in a different way, I want this for myself as much as I want it for him, then you have a chance of really actually, that your body, right? The sexual self does not like to be pressured. So it's going to be very aware of this. But if it trusts that you are on board, okay, then that sense of freedom comes back. Like, she's in control here. She's not being told she has to do anything. She wants to be here. Okay. Sexual self will come with you. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that, you're just going to be high passion because you made a decision, but you now aren't working against your sexual self. And then what I would suggest is a valuable goal is truly just settling down together without any particular goal of arousal, of passion, of intercourse, of orgasm, just taking those demands off the table and settling down together. Now, Dr. Schnarch, who I studied with for a number of years, had different exercises, one of which was hugging till relaxed. The core goal of the exercises was calming down your mind, because in calming your mind, you could find that deeper source within yourself. And the paradox is, paradox, but like it's maybe not intuitive for us, is the more we belong to ourselves, the closer we can be to another person. Dr. Schnarch would always talk about that idea that we want to belong to other people. We want to know that we're loved, but we also want to belong to ourselves. And if being close to others means we betray that sense of belonging to ourselves, we will put up a wall with other people. Even if we're doing everything they want us to do, we won't be present with them. And so the way that we find our source, right, and the ability to be closer is learning how to be more deeply anchored within ourselves while we're very close to our spouse. And so hugging till relaxed is one way to do this. I talk about these more in the courses, so I won't give all the specifics of how you do hugging till relaxed, but the goal is settling down together, because then you can feel closer. Or Dr. Stephen Schneider talks about this as the two-step, which is that you take your clothes off and lie next to each other in bed and settle down together without any goal, without any demand, without an expectation, no idea that this has to lead anywhere, but to just be with one another and to feel the sensuality of your own body, right? To like feel your skin against the sheets, to listen to the rhythm of your breath, to just settle down. And you can have conversations, you can touch each other some, but the goal is not about getting aroused or trying to get aroused. It's about being, simply being. Now, this sounds super easy, okay? It can be harder for people than they sometimes realize. Like sometimes people have a harder time with not producing anything, okay? And just being with one another and being settled. Like they want to manage their anxiety by moving forward or getting their clothes back on or something. It's just learning to be with one another, to settle down your own body and mind, and to settle your sexual self too, because your sexual self is looking out for you, wants to know if you're going to be true to you. I quoted this person in my book, but now I cannot think of it. But basically, the idea is that, when the mind is calm, we can know things as they actually are. And so the goal is to calm down, because when we calm ourselves, we can belong to ourselves. We can hold on to our value more, and we can see our partner more. When we're really anxious, we tend to try to control each other, avoid each other. We try to pressure each other, but they're all in this reactivity. So the calmer we can be, the more our capacity for intimacy goes up. Okay. Then in that state of calm, you can begin to enjoy your sensuality with your spouse. Okay. But again, what I would say to this person is do not place any goals. Do not make it about work. Okay. I would say make it about enjoyment of each other, enjoying being touched, enjoying touching them. Now, this can be really easy in a sense, and in another way, really hard. People can definitely start feeling like, well, no, he's feeling all this arousal and wait, I'm not supposed, now I just have to basically, give him an orgasm or have intercourse or whatever it is. And I would strongly discourage you from doing that, because then you've put this other meaning in place again that is antithetical to erotic energy. That I would stay wherever you can be together and enjoy yourself and each other. That's where I would hang out. Okay. And if your body's leading the way to more sexuality, more pleasure, you can certainly follow and certainly enjoy that, right? But just don't start coming in with goals. Goals, sexual self is no interest in goals. It has no interest in work. It wants to be free. It wants to enjoy. And this is very, very valuable. Okay. In a Western society that's highly focused on goals and and accomplishing and checking boxes, it can often work against the core of erotic energy, of life-giving energy.
Someone, just as you were saying that, said, what if you aren't enjoying being together?
Okay, that's a good question. What if you just don't enjoy lying next to each other? Well, I would say that then you have bigger challenges. Okay, that is to say, if you really don't enjoy being together, then I think you have to figure out, what do we need to address between us to deal with the larger relationship. I mean, this is of course a lot of the work that I do, which is sexuality is really important, but it's also true if we just distrust one another, dislike one another, I can't settle down. In fact, I can't settle down because I do not trust you. I'm not in a collaborative alliance with you. And so, in my 2 couples courses, I'm giving people frameworks to think about what's actually happening between us that we don't feel free to be ourselves. What are the larger meanings that we need to deal with to really access the foundational meaning that brought us together, the erotic meaning that brought us together? And I'm just going to clarify what I mean by that, because some people hate the word erotic, but it's a wonderful word. Okay. Some reason why a lot of people hate the word erotic is it's sort of the commercialized, cheapened version of eros, which is pornography. Okay. The kind of cheap versions of sexual interest that are out there. But the real meaning of erotic comes from the word eros, and eros is about this life energy. Eros, love, right, is about this desire for communion, the pursuit of another soul. Okay, this is how C.S. Lewis talks about it, and lots of other theorists talked about it. Carl Jung talks about it in this way. And so that pursuit of another soul is what eros love is, what drives us to the one that we choose and the one we marry. And so marriages need that erotic energy. That's really at the core of their inception. It's what is at the foundation of a marriage. A lot of people think that means you have sex. Well, no, you can have sex in a way that kills all erotic energy, right? Eros is that sense that you and I desire each other. We want to be with one another, that we are not just friends, that we're lovers, like that we have a sense of connection to each other that matters. This is easy in the beginning. It's harder as the marriage goes on if we can't grow into people capable of loving and knowing each other. And that requires our growth. And so if you were in a stalemate of sorts, that we just can't even be next to each other without deep anxiety, fear, anger, resentment, it's important to deal with. I've had plenty of couples where I assigned them to do the hugging till relaxed exercise. And in doing it, they were understanding how deeply anxious they were with their partner. I mean, here they're trying to have sex and they cannot even be in a hug without feeling that they're going to go into some deep panic. Okay. And that is to say, that's a very important and revealing reality to understand that I'm not settling down. I'm getting more and more and more ramped up being here against your body. And so what is going on that we need to address and understand? Because we'll never have a sexual relationship that has any life in it, any true sense of connection and ease and peace and joy, if we can't address the larger meaning of the distrust or the resentment or the fear or this feeling that I can't be myself with you. That's so much the core of the work that I do, is about helping couples to figure out what is actually happening between us. Because again, when a couple is alive and well, there's this sense that I can belong to me and you, that we can be true to ourselves and true to each other. And that's really the core meaning of a joyful marriage. But it requires our growth, and it requires letting the marriage teach us about how to be a more loving person and a more fair person and truer to ourselves and truer to a spouse. And sex shows this to us deeply too. If I've gone around judging myself or just trying to take care of his needs or just trying to, make her happy with me by trying to give her an orgasm or something, these are meanings that are often showing us how we're in relationship to ourselves and our partner and why they're causing us distress. So that was a long answer there, but that is to say, you have to deal with then, you don't have to. Okay. You could say, I dislike my partner enough that I don't want to try and have a sexual relationship with them. You can make that decision. Or it's so hard to even lie next to you that maybe we need to start doing some real work about why there's enough frustration here that it's too hard to even be next to each other in the stillness. That's a couple that's moving forward and doing, I've had plenty of people that have come to my events and that they came in wondering if they were even going to be together at the end of it. That is to say that they're really considering divorce. But then when you have two people that start to step in and start really looking at their contribution to the war that's been happening between them, between the anger and the frustration, and start self-confronting, then you have a much more hopeful marriage at that point, because you can actually channel the core foundational love you have for each other that started the marriage in the first place and allow you to start to reconnect to what you once were and can grow into something stronger. I'm just going to take this question I just saw come in. What would you suggest if being true to yourself in some ways conflicts with being true to your spouse and vice versa? So I would say to that question, I mean, my initial response to it, and maybe I will change my mind by the end of it. My first response to it in some ways is that in some sense, you cannot be really true to your partner and not be true to yourself, and vice versa. You can't really be true to yourself and betray a partner. If you really choose someone and you're saying, you are my person and I am committed here, that I can't betray you and be true to my highest self. And I can't betray myself and be true to the relationship, because if I betray myself, I undermine the relationship. I just like the person who was saying, I've accommodated all these years and I don't even want to have sex. Well, that's a self-betrayal that ultimately betrays the relationship. And when we're in a marriage that's thriving, we are dealing with that tension of how to be true to ourselves and true to our spouse by figuring out, how do we do that? Okay, you want these things and I want these things. And so how are you and I going to grow in ways that allow us to be true to the best in ourselves and each other? And so if you hold on to that goal, then you can grow into people that can find a way to do that. Now, this is maybe the part where I disagree with myself slightly. I'm not saying that there aren't times when someone out of their strength would say that I can't choose this anymore. Okay. That because depending on what their partner is doing. Okay. Or that they can't decide to let go of a desire given that their spouse doesn't want the same thing. But when it's really about growing, you are out of integrity, even if there's loss, even if it's letting go of something that matters to you, you're still dealing with the finite reality in which you exist and making a choice that's being true to the best in yourself because you think it is the most fair and loving thing to do for yourself and your situation. So we don't live in a world in which everybody wins at all times, okay? Or that, there's always a way to find an answer where everybody's happy. But I think we do live in a world that's not in the Garden of Eden and is asking us to sort out, what does it mean to love in this situation? To love is to be true to me and true to you. What does that mean for who we are? what hard choice does that mean I may be up against? But that's what it asks of us. Good sex involves character development, always. Okay, well, good sex, maybe that's not the case when you first meet somebody, okay? Because there's all these other factors that you have this immersion in erotic energy and it feels wonderful. But in a long-term marriage, character development is absolutely foundational to the erotic. You're transcending your lesser self. And that transcendence is where eros energy thrives. Okay. Let me do this next question. This person says, my husband has always had a higher sex drive and valued sexual intimacy more than me. I thought he and I had come to a compromise with how often and how long we had sex, with 1 out of 2 or 2 out of 3 of the instances being quicker versions of sex. He recently told me he doesn't feel good about those quickies because he's only being acted upon and not participating. But to eliminate the quickies is problematic. It either means substituting for more involved sex, but I don't think I can make that happen that often, or having way less sex, but he feels disconnected and lonely that way. We feel stuck. We're brand new to your resources and hope to find guidance in them. Okay, good. Okay, so let me see. Where do I start with this? So I'm not completely sure when you're saying you're doing a quickie and yet he's just being acted upon, but I'm assuming what that means is that the wife is giving the husband an orgasm in some form that's not about her arousal and or intercourse, right? And so that's why he's saying he's just being acted upon. And so it sounds like, and I may be wrong if I'm not seeing this question the right way, that the wife on some level is kind of dealing with her husband's need, quote unquote, for an orgasm or desire for an orgasm, but she herself doesn't really want to show up fully except maybe once every 3 times, and that he's not liking that. Okay. Which doesn't surprise me that he's not liking it, although he's participating in the problem, in my opinion. So I generally think it's a very bad idea to do sex in this way because it's about work. Okay. And for the wife, if I'm right in my understanding of what's happening in these sexual experiences, this is absolutely going to make sex less desirable. You know, when someone says, I don't value sexual intimacy as much as my spouse, it's very often because the person who doesn't value it as much experiences it as a place of pressure and work and producing. Okay. Now, I don't mean that's just the spouse's fault in that place and that they're just being pressured. Okay. We can come into those meanings in our own way, in a way that makes us dislike being there. But giving the sexual engagement this idea that I have to take care of your orgasm is going to make you dislike sex, dislike your spouse's phallus, okay? Because it's not about your pleasure. One thing I would strongly recommend is, if for this couple, would be very similar to what I just said. It's like being together when you can both be there, that you both choose to be with each other and can enjoy each other, but not in this servicing idea. Now, somebody may want to have an orgasm and they don't want, you know, and their spouse doesn't want to be involved. Okay. That sometimes in our religious upbringing, we think, well, I'm not supposed to touch my own genitals, so it means you need to do it. I know you hate it, but like, you've got to be the one. Okay. I just really disagree with that idea. You may not want to touch yourself in another room, but you could lie next to your spouse, right? And if you really feel like you need an orgasm, and not sort of make them take care of you. So I think there's a lot of ways to figure that out, or just choose not to have an orgasm. But I don't think you should ask your spouse to take care of you in that way if you want them to like sex. The other thing I would say is that when you're trying to pleasure your spouse or give them pleasure, that is not what eros likes. Okay. It's not what our sexual selves like. Our sexual selves like to take pleasure in another person, right? We like to enjoy them, enjoy their body, enjoy being with them, but we don't like the pressure or the work of trying to get them to have pleasure. First of all, we can't control it. And now we're squarely in the mindset of work. Okay. So a lot of well-intentioned men are like trying to be the good lover and they're trying to get their wife to have an orgasm. And it's taking a long time. Okay. And it's often taking a long time because, first of all, women just do take longer than men. And a lot of times people don't know that. So women are busy judging themselves for taking 20 to 30 minutes when that's just normal. Okay. Very normal. And then they're feeling anxious and judging themselves, which is making the likelihood that their pleasure is going down. The likelihood of orgasm is going down because they're trying so hard to make something happen. Nobody's having very much fun. The husband is also getting it bored, impatient, because you're not in the throes of eros energy. You're in this like work mindset. The wife is mapping that he's getting impatient. And then she's thinking, maybe he doesn't even really love me that much. Maybe he's just bored. And these are all meanings where eros is gone. Okay. And so even if you manage to eke out an orgasm, it has not like been an experience of expansion and freedom and ease. And so I think it's a great idea also to not think about it as taking care of orgasms or making sure you get anywhere, but that when you come together, it's about enjoying each other and taking pleasure in the other. Okay. Now, we may think, taking pleasure sounds so selfish. Like, you're not supposed to take pleasure, you're supposed to give pleasure. And I would just say that's 100% wrong. Okay. You take pleasure. Okay. Now, in Eros, and C.S. Lewis says this too, that in Eros love, the distinction between giving and receiving is one of the first things is it gets blurred, that those two go together. Okay. I think women and men both feel this, like to feel that your spouse is just truly enjoying you. They are into you. They like you. They like touching you, like kissing you, like the feel of your lips. Okay, that's erotic. Okay, that's validating. Remember, we like having sex when we feel good about ourselves. And so taking pleasure in your spouse not only is erotic for you, it's erotic for them. Okay. Having to do something to get them to feel some feeling that you can't control makes you both feel pressured. So I would recommend that you not do any more of that and that you only, that you lie next to each other naked, enjoy each other sensually, but take the goals off the table and let the pleasure lead the way. So this person writes, how can I know if my lack of desire is attributed more to me going through perimenopause or my feelings of disconnect with my husband? Where do I start if I desperately want to get that drive back? Okay. So first of all, I would go to a gynecologist and just get some assessment done on your hormone levels and just see if testosterone levels have plummeted or if there is a hormonal contribution to your lowering desire. There very, very well may be. Also, when women's estrogen levels drop with perimenopause and menopause, often they get less accommodating. Okay. So, had never thought about this actually having a biochemical element to it because I've watched a lot of women who their kids left home, they are in menopause, their parents have died, or just things like that are going on. And they start to get more angry in their marriage. They start saying, like, I'm not doing this anymore, and so on. And I've always just kind of thought that it was about some of the losses and disappointments, and then they start standing up in a different way. And I think that's true. I think those meanings are absolutely there. But I do think there's also a hormonal contribution because estrogen goes down, and estrogen is more of a hormone that makes you accommodate more and, soothe and caretake and nurture. And when that goes down, I think women often start addressing more readily, more easily, things that they have not been happy with in the marriage. It's also true, like if your kids have all left and now you're looking at your partner and you're thinking, wait, do we like each other still? You may start feeling some of your discontentment in the marriage in a different way. So it could well be both things. And then I'm just going to add a third possibility is that if you start fretting about the fact that you're not feeling desire, because when you're saying, I feel desperate to feel that again, now there's nothing wrong with the fact that you want to feel it, okay, because it's a wonderful part of life. But if we start judging and getting anxious about the fact that we're feeling it less, it will work against that desire showing up. I've told the story before, but I remember when I was becoming menopausal and it was like right at the beginning of COVID and there was just a lot of uncertainty and I was like, oh my gosh, things are going to change and maybe my desire is going to go down. And I think because there was also a larger kind of anxiety going on in the country. And then I think there was something going on. My child was having a hard time at that time. So I think it was a lot of factors, but I felt my desire plummet. And then I started to panic about that fact. Like, what if this means we're done? My husband and our relationship is not going to make it. What if I just don't ever feel desire again? And I just started like panicking inside myself around that. And then at, a certain point I expressed to him, I'm really afraid of that. Like, I'm really afraid. What if this thing that's been a good part of our lives just goes away? And I just remember him saying to me, we're going to be okay no matter what happens. We're just going to be okay because we care about each other and we'll get through it. And, and like giving myself that, like, okay, like I don't need to worry about something I can't control. We are going to be friends. We can get through anything. Desire came back. Like, it was just freer because that sense of freedom and acceptance, okay, very, very important. Acceptance is very, very important in a sexual relationship, that you and I care about each other. This is not about producing results. This is about you and I can be with each other. We can be ourselves with each other. We can enjoy one another in whatever form that takes. So you may have any one or all three of those factors. And I would start with the doctor, just see if there's something going on there that could use some hormonal support, or just know what your options are on that front. I would be looking at, am I getting unnecessarily panicked about this? Because again, even if hormonal levels drop, meaning is the biggest driver of desire. And so you can work with those meanings. You can also get hormonal help if you want it, right? There's some women at this stage that will get a testosterone pellet or have some kind of testosterone enhancement that makes a big difference, right, in their sexual arousal. So you can just remind yourself that you have options. And then if it's also true that, like, okay, there are things that are actually frustrating me, or there's like, not to be too panicked about the fact that desire has gone down around your spouse and some of the issues there, just to know that that's kind of a normal response when there's conflict or frustration. And we're going to be okay. Just how do we start addressing or talking more honestly about what's not working? So desire is often a very important litmus test about what's going on in the marriage. And rather than panic about it, utilize it to address the marriage more deeply.
Someone just said while you were saying that, I'm all for orgasms. I have a hard time reaching climax. Now that this has happened, I'm anxious every time we have sex. How do I get over the anxiousness?
I missed what the thing was that was making them anxious, that they don't orgasm every time.
They just, oh yeah, they had an experience not orgasming, and now that that's happened, they're anxious every time they have sex.
Okay. So I would be curious about, what meaning have I given to that fact? What is scaring me about that? That somehow it's a challenge to my virility, it's a challenge to my sense of control, it's a challenge to, that I'm going to disappoint my spouse, that it makes it seem like I'm not as attracted. I would just try to get at what is the anxiety, because there's nothing wrong with not having an orgasm. It's the meaning that we place on it that creates the suffering. And so what suffering have I placed on it? And can I just offer a deeper acceptance to myself? Especially as you get older, your body's just not going to be as reliable. I mean, bodies disappoint and they disappoint because you're stressed or you're tired or you're not feeling well. Also, as you age, your body's going to be a lot less predictable. And actually, there is a segment of couples whose sense of intimacy and enjoyment actually goes up as they age, because in some ways they just grow into a deeper grace for themselves and each other. And they learn the deep secret of enjoying each other, even if their bodies aren't as responsive as they once were. There's another segment of people that start panicking about the fact, and often it's men that will shut down the sexual relationship in their 60s because of erectile dysfunction, and they feel more exposed by it. And so they handle that exposure by just initiating sex less often, being less sexual, because they fear their humanity showing through. We are always, always going to do much better in our sexual relationships the more deeply compassionate we can be for our own humanity and the humanity of our partner, because that acceptance is the driving energy of a good sexual relationship. So understand what the fear is, because it may be linked to a larger issue or meaning that it would help you to address. But also, the more you can just say, it's okay. There's going to be times when that happens and we'll be all right. We'll be okay. I'll be okay. Then you're just more likely that your body will do what you want it to do.
She clarified that if
Yep.
she doesn't have an orgasm, her husband takes it personally.
There we go. Okay, got it. Yeah. Yeah. Then I would talk about that directly. What I would say to my spouse if I were her is, I feel a lot of pressure to manage your feelings about yourself by having an orgasm. And that is a pressure that interferes with the enjoyment. And so you are a good lover. I am attracted to you. And that pressure is hard on me and on my sexual desire. And, lots of men have learned the idea that if they're a good lover, they bring their spouse to orgasm. They give her pleasure. And so a lot of men are functioning under the pressure of pleasuring their wives. And that's a hard pressure to put on a man, because even women sometimes don't know how to get themselves to orgasm. And then if a woman is tracking that he is trying so hard and that he will feel bad, right? Then they're trying to prove themselves and prove him through her having an orgasm. And that is so much work, so much pressure on an orgasm that you can't even control. You can't even control orgasms. They are a simple reflex in the body. But all that anxiety makes it almost certain it won't happen. And so I would recommend, again, to the man in that situation that he not worry about her arousal and her pleasure. I mean, of course, if she says, hey, it really helps me if you touch me this way, sure, that's absolutely fine, right? But not the idea that I have to get her there, because you unwittingly will be interfering with your own pleasure and interfering with hers. So if your pleasure goes down, also hers goes down, because we feed on each other's pleasure. But also, if you just take responsibility for your own pleasure and enjoyment, she's freer and she's feeling enjoyed. And then she can just take responsibility for her own orgasm, which sometimes still may not happen, of course, but she can just not worry about you. She can just worry about her. And again, people are like, wait, isn't that selfish? Aren't you supposed to be taking care of the other and all that? And no, it's not the right energy in good lovemaking. In good lovemaking, you're taking pleasure in the other person.
Someone said, as a higher desire partner, if pressure kills libido, but it's not intentional, how do I back off on all feedback, statements of desire, pursuit, acts of affection without compromising myself? Put another way, isn't that just costly accommodation?
Yeah, you just want to look at what you're doing. I think you can be free to enjoy, to express desire, to express enjoyment in your partner, I guess to self-reveal. But you just, I don't have enough time to kind of tease out what's going on there. There is a difference between pressuring your spouse and your existence being a kind of pressure. And so what I mean by that is somebody may be saying that they're just revealing their mind, but they actually are trying to get their spouse to do what they want. And that is really the goal, even though they're saying, I'm just revealing what I think and feel. Or are you just truly enjoying your spouse, noticing her or his attractiveness, revealing your pleasure in them? If you're just sort of revealing your pleasure in them, they may feel pressured by the fact of the marriage, okay, and the fact of who you are. That's not really something that is your responsibility. But it's a little tricky because we're not often good at reading how we're coming off. And so what I would be curious about if I were the person that was revealing my desire a lot and my spouse was saying they felt pressured by it, I would, rather than justify myself against what I just said, I would say, tell me what you mean by feeling pressured. Now, if they were to say, well, I just know that you want it all the time and that stresses me out, I would say that's probably the fact of being married. And, I do want to have it with you. I do want that experience. Okay. If it's like, look, I feel like you are always trying to convince me, you're always trying to get something from me. I mean, you want to better understand how your spouse is actually experiencing you so that you can actually figure out if you're as cleaned up as you think you are around this. The other thing I would just say is it about really enjoying your spouse, that they see that you look at them with a sense of knowing them, caring about them, valuing them? Or is it about sort of always trying to get to that goal of having sex? So I just think that those are two different energies, because is it about enjoying them and enjoying sexual energy together? Or is it about getting to an end goal? And I think those read differently in a marriage. All right, Christy, take it away. Tell people we have a live women's event coming up at the end of the month.
Yes.
In Arizona.
April 24th through 26th, that Jennifer will be in Gilbert, Arizona for an Art of Desire workshop. And it's going to be a really unique opportunity because she's teaching for 3 full days, it's half a day longer than our workshops normally are. And it's a lower price than the retreat. So we would love to have you join us. We have a $100 off promo code going right now. The code is DESIRE. And I could talk your ear off about the Art of Desire workshop. That's where everything changed for me. It was a big pivot point in my life, and you won't regret coming. Learn more about these topics. It's fantastic. And I know a couple hundred women who would agree with me there.
Okay, everybody. Thanks so much. I hope you have a good week, and we'll talk to you next month.